Alright guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about why RE2's direction in writing, drama and cinematography are so important to the genre as a whole, and also where Capcom's influences on their decision making have come from. So without any further delay, let's get into this topic anyway. And to start off, we'll have to go through a little bit of the history of Resident Evil as a whole. It all started with Resident Evil 1. Now you are looking at the 2002 upgrade version in the background for footage. However, this archaic and simplified version of RE was where the original masterpiece and fan cultism that surrounded it all sprang into action. After making Resident Evil 1, which at the time was a hugely successful title to release, Capcom then decided to make Resident Evil 2, which expanded the environment and the outbreak into an entire city, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis also expanded on this city as well even further. Now just for the purpose of the video, I won't be naming side games such as Outbreak because we'd be here forever. However, the original 3 games were a significant trilogy, all a masterpiece in their own right. After this, Capcom did want to remake Resident Evil 1, however, due to technical limitations, the original game was not at the quality that the company was happy with, and so a project was undertaken to revitalize it and show it in the former glory of what they originally intended, with a lot of the systems being expanded upon and a whole subplot even being added with the architect's daughter Lisa Trevor, which added a bunch of additional lore pieces and filled a few gaps in, and also gave the Trevors quite an unfortunate ending to each individual. It also helped sharpen how much of a villain that the Spencer character really was. It was apparent at this point that Capcom, after Resident Evil 2 and 3, and then especially the remake, had gone all in on the storytelling and writing and even the cinematography since the original game. They were taking on a much more serious approach now, and then came along Resident Evil 4, which included a plot to save the president's daughter. We were back in touch with the rookie Leon Kennedy, however this time around he wasn't so vulnerable and had quite an affinity for close quarters combat. This changed the entire mechanical systems and gameplay for all future RE titles that would come and have remained even firmly up to Resident Evil 7, and thus brought a whole new health and breed into the genre overall. And although considered one of the best Resident Evil titles ever produced, Resident Evil 4 is definitely where the narrative stopped being so dramatic, surprisingly compared to the previous games, and started becoming more linear, more streamlined, and less about survival and horror elements, and more about action and feeling like a superhero that can take on the waves of enemies being thrown towards you. Now, after the rights of the live action movie were licensed away, Capcom did see a huge amount of income being generated from those blockbuster movies that were just absolute action pieces with no real horror, or at least very little included within them. The original Resident Evil's live action movie, I'll give it that one. That one did have a lot of horror going for it, and it was actually a decent movie, to be honest. Resident Evil 2 was a mixed one and went way more towards action, especially with the weird ending. And then we all know what happens from Resident Evil 3 onwards. But regardless of that, they sold a lot of tickets, a lot of DVDs, and a lot of merchandise. And Capcom was noticing this, and I think this definitely influenced titles afterwards, such as Resident Evil 5 and 6. I think everyone can agree the writing went a little bit out of the window in focus of more action elements for Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 6 was a mixed one because it did have so many protagonists. It's actually similar to Resident Evil 2's remake and what they're doing right now, but Resident Evil 5 definitely kind of went out of the window with the writing a little bit. Both of these games, regardless of their addition to the lore or how different they were from the original titles, and even Resident Evil 4, did sell extremely well, and this kind of did prove a point to Capcom that doing action is actually a really good idea. However, then came in Resident Evil 7, and everyone was surprised because Capcom, even though they had such a large amount of sales with their action development, just went back to survival horror completely, with you feeling absolutely vulnerable in the demo until later patches allowed you access to a firearm. Capcom had completely 180'd in every aspect of development. You could say it was due to fan outcry since Resident Evil 5 and 6, you could say it's due to people in Japan boycotting the company, or you could just say it's management with their own ideals and visions being very different from each other, being assigned to separate projects and thus coming to completely different gameplay types. There's a lot of different variables, of course, and it could be a mixture of all of these and more. However, Resident Evil 7 had definitely gone back to a feeling of vulnerability, and survival horror was completely back on the table. There was no real big action moments, maybe just for the final 10 minutes of the game, but most of the game had you feeling like a lost child at a mansion full of monsters. However, Resident Evil 7 didn't sell nearly as well as its predecessors. And why is that? Was it the FPS view? Was it the length of the playtime? The lack of additional campaigns? No, I think it was the writing. Something just didn't seem to fully add up or appetize anyone. There was no real memorable moments with Resident Evil 7 other than just one or two, which everyone does remember when you say, such as the Jack hallucination scene with his daughter, but there was also a lot of plot holes littered throughout the game, and then the DLCs didn't really help out with those and just made it all a muddled mess. But I do believe that this was just a tech demonstration to show off the new RE engine's capabilities, and if it was, Resident Evil 7 definitely showed off how beautiful the RE engine looks and how optimized it runs for how great the performance is that it outputs. Now, looking at Resident Evil 2's remake, I can accept this excuse, and it really did allow the team to work out a lot of the kinks, especially to do with larger environments, and build Resident Evil 2's production up while Resident Evil 7 was being developed simultaneously. Due to working everything out and finding out how to utilize their own engine better, Resident Evil 2's remake looks even finer, sharper, and more aesthetic than ever before, and expands upon the original game's color palette with a whole different variety, with much more darker environments as well. And this is why Resident Evil 2's remake is such an important production. We were all asking for a remake quite a long time ago. It even says Resident Evil 2 Remake on the original We Do It screen, and a remake is very different from a remaster, because in a remake we're going to see additional areas and lore points explored that add on to the chronology and expand the universe. Now, this is a really great undertaking and a risky one too, but it looks like Capcom does want to deliver on those expectations. However, a remake could have been another generic Resident Evil 6 action piece, and it could have been handled in a completely different way. But we're getting a survival horror game, a true one at that, with all of the elements it seems that most of the fans have wanted all combined into one single piece. And this game basically merges them perfectly together, as well as adds a whole new layer of writing that hasn't been undertaken by Capcom ever before, already looking to rival games like The Last of Us, Death Stranding, as well as Uncharted in extensive drama, articulate plot design, character development, growth and attachment, and many more factors as well. All of us have wanted a Last of Us style Resident Evil game for the longest time. We've requested it ever since we've seen that style of survival cinematography and beautiful storytelling and narrative. Uncharted was another one, as I said, and quite a few games ever since. And this is basically the new gold standard for game development, and it looks like Capcom is answering those questions with Resident Evil 2. As I've theorized before, it looks like we're going to see the whole rainbow of character spectrums, being able to play from a vulnerable little girl all the way up to Agent Hunk that's already a deadly soldier. Now, if you don't want to go back to Resident Evil 5 and 6, vote with your wallet. Again, the industry listens to money very well. If you do go all in, and those sales of Resident Evil 2 do do peak and also compete with Resident Evil 5 and 6, then Capcom will definitely see a future in the development of these kinds of production value, quality content, games. And in the survival horror genre, this kind of writing and production quality is unforeseen, so we kind of need some more of those, to be honest. And thus, the only company that can do that at the moment does seem to be Capcom. We'll see how Death Stranding turns out and whether that's a survival or more horror style game. There's still a lot to know about that, it's confusing. But Capcom has already teased that they're going to be making more remakes and future titles like Resident Evil 3's remake, and based on how Resident Evil 2 is received in its current survival horror foundation, I'm sure future titles will be influenced. So as the fans, it is up to you guys to see how those future titles will be implemented and whether they will be more survival horror focused or whether Capcom should go back to doing action. Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comments below. I just want to give a very big special thanks to all my patrons that help support this content, and if you do want to come join the Discord server, there is a link to my Twitter, my Discord, my Patreon, the music, absolutely everything in the description as well. I just hope you're having a beautiful day. As always, take it easy and peace.